5.
Curry hits a three.
4.
Just for the try. Deep left field.
3.
Patrick hit by Watt. Sack number 10.
2.
Messi with a record-breaking goal.
1.
Welcome to BSS Sports. Now, here are your hosts, Steve and Trevor.
Good afternoon and welcome to another edition of BSS Sports. My name is Steve Schill with the ever-lovely Trevor Struthers, and I guess the topic that I want to start off with is the NFL, and I guess you could say sports in general, but more or less the NFL from an injury standpoint. We've seen Aaron Rodgers go down, J.J. Watt go down. We're now looking at Jay Cutler possibly having a cracked rib from the match yesterday with the win over the Jets. And Joe Thomas, one of the players for the Cleveland Browns, who has been a part of over 10,000 snaps, ends up getting injured, and he's out. I don't know if it's just this year that injuries seem more prevalent or what it is, and it's all the talk about, now athletes are bigger, better, faster, stronger. I guess my question is, what's your take on the NFL? Is it becoming too dangerous of a sport, or are athletes really just getting that much more stronger, so they're having way harder of hits when they do have them?
I think that athletes definitely are getting a lot stronger, and that's something to do with it. But you'd also think as well, the injury prevention would improve just like the strength would as well, to any degree that you can. And I guess, it all comes down to these guys are still human, and so injuries are going to happen, especially in a sport like football. There's no more physical sport than football. These are guys that are, the thing that casual fans don't pay as much attention to in football is the most physical aspect of the game, when the offensive line and defensive line meet off of every snap. Like, that is just how physical football is that the most physical aspect you don't really pay too much attention to. So, injuries are going to happen. There's no doubt about that, right? You're getting hit hard, and these are strong guys that train to compete. And, thankfully, we don't have anything going on like, or at least as far as we know, like the Saints bounty, if you want to go back to a few years ago. This is a physical game, and injuries are going to happen, and it's unfortunate, right? Because the topic that we always talk about with every sports league and injuries is that you want to try to keep your stars in the game, keep the stars healthy, because ultimately that's what drives interest in the league. And now we're without Aaron Rodgers for what could be the rest of the season. The news isn't too promising. I guess there's slight hope that maybe he could come back, especially if Green Bay is able to find a way into the playoffs. But, even now losing a Carson Palmer for the rest of the season potentially as well, and I'm sure we're going to dive a little bit more specifically into Carson Palmer, but, that's an injury that's going to really handicap the Cardinals. And here you thought last week they had something with Adrian Peterson, and he goes out there yesterday and just isn't able to muster much offensively. Losing Carson Palmer is going to be backbreaking for that Cardinals team.
Okay, so keeping on the topic for the NFL just for a minute, is we're seeing across the league that certain teams are already taking, their strides in the NHL. We're seeing the LA Kings and even the Las Vegas Knights, what a story that is, which we'll get to, and they're kind of pushing ahead of the pack, and in NBA, this year, there's more super team talk than pretty much ever before, but with the NFL, we still have kind of a parity where every team theoretically could beat each other. The Bears beating the Panthers. We have the Titans and Browns game doesn't really count, but the Jaguars beating the Colts, and you wouldn't really think that would happen. The Rams absolutely decimating the Cardinals, and how does the NFL, do you think, keep its leagues on such parity?
I don't think there's any better way to kind of put it than roster size. When it ultimately comes down to it, you have so many different players that can make an impact in a football game. And I've been experiencing it with fantasy football. Michael Thomas has not had the greatest last couple of weeks in playing, and he is supposed to be that number one guy catching wise, part of the passing attack for the Saints, and the Saints still find ways to win games. So yeah, you have so many different options that can make an impact offensively, and there's so many different factors that can factor into a football game that I think it's just, when it comes to parity, it's the sport that's built the most for it, I guess, is the best way to kind of break it down. It's a sport that is kind of, and the worst sport that's kind of built for parity would be the NBA, to just kind of compare the two. Ultimately, when you're looking at the roster sizes, the smallest one being the NBA, the biggest one being the NFL. that's just, I think there's a lot more players that can make that big impact or lack thereof in a football game. And so that can lead to all of a sudden, teams coming up short in a game. And a lot of it too maybe comes down to preparation and going into those games as well.
Now, Thursday was kind of a cool day because it was the sports equinox. We had one game at least from all of the four major sports: Major League Baseball, National Basketball Association, National Football League, and of course the National Hockey League, which, just some fun facts for you. Usain Bolt deciding, hey, you know what, soccer might be his thing. Apparently he's rehabbing an injury, but might go into soccer. Another soccer news, TFC going with the points record after tying it up with Atlanta United yesterday. Well, Atlanta United, again, breaking their own record for league attendance. Okay, baseball. Holy mother of pearl. I have not watched a single baseball game, I think, this entire year, so I'm not one to be talking about this. However, the Astros, who I know has Jose Altuve, they traded for Justin Verlander, and they beat the Yankees, and everybody hates the Yankees, so I think from now on, everybody's being an Astro fan. They're taking on the LA Dodgers, and everybody's like, okay, all right, this is awesome. Astros, they haven't been that great of a team. They're going to the World Series. This is phenomenal. Now, my take on it, I think it'd be kind of cool to see the LA Dodgers take on the Yankees because, hey, you know what? It's the two teams that are able to buy their own teams. I mean, Toronto could, but of course, Rogers is kind of penny pinchers and they don't want to fork the money that way. A little bit of shade, but hey, no big deal. Trev, you happy with this World Series outlook so far?
I like the matchup. I think there's no doubt about that. But you do have a point when it comes to the Yankees and the Dodgers, and let's face it, the television networks would love that, right? I mean, because that's going to drive like those are the two biggest markets in the States, right? New York and Los Angeles. And so I think from that standpoint, they're disappointed. There is a nice story being told though with the Houston Astros, not necessarily to call them an underdog. I mean, they did just eliminate the wild card team of the American League and the ALCS, so it's not like they're necessarily an underdog. But they're going in against the big money powerhouse that is the Los Angeles Dodgers. I mean, you said it better than you can say it. The Dodgers, this is a bought team. This is a team that spent a ton of money and has for the last few years to get to this spot. And it's almost incredible to believe with the money that they have spent, they haven't got here until now. And so there's a lot of pressure on the Dodgers now to deliver in this series, deliver on that world championship, because there may need to be some changes if they're not able to get a world championship again. And on the other side with the Houston Astros, a team that's looking to win their first World Series, there's a fantastic story being told with the Hurricane Harvey relief efforts and all of the stuff that's still continuing to happen in Houston. It's a nice story being told anytime that a team can make a championship run that's to be remembered for a long time, after a lot of people in Houston had their lives changed by that hurricane.
Again, as I said, I haven't watched a whole lot of baseball, but, I mean, we are looking for the offseason for the Blue Jays. We haven't heard any Jose Bautista talks. Don't think that's going to happen. But from a GM standpoint, do you think that the Blue Jays are going to keep with who they have going forward, or do you think they're going to want to shake things up?
I think they've moved on from Jose Bautista mentally. I think the only hope he would have of coming back or even to play in any Major League Baseball team is to be a designated hitter. And he's starting to lose what he had offensively, compared to the great on-base percentages of years past and obviously the home run numbers. Those are starting to obviously take a bit of a hit, and all of a sudden his worth is declining, which is disappointing, right? He really should have had his big payday last offseason for the contract, but he got hurt the year prior, right? And so he had that injury to try to bounce back from, and he struggled from that. And so, I mean, this is a guy that was a franchise player and may go down with having to retire without that big contract that he ultimately deserved. But a lot of that has to do with timing and the contracts and how all that works out, right? You got to be playing right at that right time when that contract's up. That's why players being in their free agent year is such a big deal when it comes to wanting to make that big cash. And so Jose Bautista wasn't able to do that. I don't think they bring him back. I think they're ready to move on. Teoscar Hernandez looks like he's going to be a guy in the Blue Jays outfield for years to come if they're able to keep him around for a long time. So I think they're ready to move on. You have Kevin Pillar still there as well. That's a younger guy for the Blue Jays outfield. So I think they've moved on from Bautista in terms of playing in the outfield, because I think he's lost it at that point. If Bautista has a hope of playing in the major leagues, maybe he can find a DH role somewhere, which obviously kind of limits him to half the teams in Major League Baseball. So that's really, in my opinion, his only hope of trying to stick around. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe a team will take a shot at him. Maybe a National League team will even take a shot at him for a guy that can come off the bench. He is a guy that does have some leadership ability to him. Some people dislike the attitude that he can bring. But, this is a guy that definitely was a leader for a Blue Jays team that went to the American League Championship Series 2 years in a row. So there's some value there.
All right, and then in the National Basketball Association, the opening week, Premier Week is what they called it this week. I don't know if they're trying to take that off the Premier League in soccer, but hey, that's what happened. Opening night, Gordon Hayward. That was a time. If you have not heard, Gordon Hayward, the man who Boston signed and broke every Jazz fan's heart, injured himself 5-6 minutes into the game, broke his ankle, but then the next night there was a video of him from the hospital saying, "Hi, fans." It was great, massive applause, very touching, and all that jazz. But Boston looking a bit fine without him, I guess. They're 1-2 so far. That doesn't mean that they are not a winning team in the future, because again, we're only 3 games in. It does harp them, but only because they traded a bunch of people to get Kyrie Irving and get rid of Isaiah Thomas, who Isaiah Thomas is out for the Cleveland Cavaliers, which is a whole nother thing. Cleveland lost to the Magic the other night, which was a little strange. Detroit coming back huge against the Knicks. The Knicks look like a fairly good team. Philadelphia hasn't won a game yet. Washington looks phenomenal. What else? The Los Angeles Clippers. Okay, so the LA Clippers, I thought, okay, you're out of Chris Paul. You're not going to be that great. Holy mother of word, the Los Angeles Clippers, I really like their chances. Rich Beverly is an outstanding defensive point guard, which is going to come up huge with the stacked Western Conference and all the point guards over there, as well, crossover games and whatnot. I really think the Clippers have a shot at doing something beyond the first couple of rounds of the playoffs this year. Houston as well, looking good. Dallas Mavericks looking awful. Didn't really think much of a change on there. But the Toronto Raptors, Jose Valanciunas getting injured, but they're still got their winning ways. DeMar DeRozan looking good. The whole team looks fairly decent. I guess the question for you, Trev, because there's not much really to talk about the team, is that if the Raptors at the end of the season don't make the playoffs, or, they probably will make the playoffs, if they don't get out of the first round, is Dwayne Casey fired?
We've been wondering this for a few years now, and I've probably said on this show once or twice that I think he was going to be fired. So always take what I say with a grain of salt, but there's something maybe to be said about that. There's a lot of pressure that, especially right now, that maybe this could be the year for the Toronto Raptors to really make some noise in the regular season and maybe into the playoffs as well. Because you look at Cleveland, and right now it is Kyrie Irving and LeBron James broken up. You look, they have Isaiah Thomas there now in Cleveland, but we don't know. It's way too early in the season to know exactly how that Cleveland team is going to plan out. With Boston, losing Gordon Hayward's a huge loss for that team, and how is that going to affect the team in the long term, and how is that going to affect them when they meet the Raptors head-to-head? There's ultimately a chance that maybe somewhere in the second round, maybe it's like a Boston and Toronto series, and Toronto could come out on top in that series, right? So losing Gordon Hayward is a big thing for Boston, and it does increase the Raptors' chances of doing some damage in the Eastern Conference. I do look at as well that the fact that, Kyrie Irving and LeBron James, those were the guys that kind of destroyed the Raptors in those years that the Raptors were able to get somewhere until they ran into the Cavs, that there is some hope because those guys are separate now too.
And finally, the Belleville Senators finally won a game, but yesterday they lost 7-4 against the Springfield Thunderbirds, who previously were 0-6. We still have hope. Hopefully we'll do something down the way. Again, the home opener for them is November 1st. Hopefully the arena's done in time. And that's it for this edition of BSS Sports. Make sure to like us on Twitter and follow us on Facebook. I reversed that. Make sure to like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter at BSS Sports. Archiving all of our works on YouTube at BSS Productions. For Trevor, Struthers, and myself, Stephen Schill, we'll catch you next Monday.